This episode brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can get a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Kieran Boyle, in last year's draft, the Atlanta Falcons traded back into the first round to take edge rusher James Pierce, who was actually the best performing rookie pass rusher in last year's draft. He racked up more sacks than anyone else, but he may not be playing for the Falcons in the 2026-27 season because of his off-field issues, which the Falcons really should have done a little bit more research before expending all that draft capital. Long story short, they don't have a first-round pick in the 2026 draft because of that. On paper, arguably the most talented team in the division, but also year in, year out, the serial underperformers in the NFC South, a division of serial underperformers.
The Jots, yes. The Pierce thing was really bizarre. I mean, like you said, he had a great first season, 10.5 sacks, but I mean, there's all sorts of different stories about whether he'll be available, whether he'll be on the roster, etc. So there's no point really speculating on that right now. All to say that they're probably going to need a linebacker in the draft. But again, it's a new dawn in Atlanta. Matt Ryan is in there. Terry Fontenot is gone, as I'm sure a lot of Falcon fans will be happy. The whole Penix Cousins experiment was great while it lasted. And
they've got Ian Cunningham as their general manager, although apparently he's not their general manager, so the Bears didn't get a compensatory pick. But let's not go there.
Well, let's see how Matt Ryan does back in Atlanta. Let's see what he's got cooking.
When Matt Ryan blames Ian Cunningham for the draft, I want that compensatory pick for the Bears. I'm waiting on that.
I mean,
the receipt on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the situation Ryan probably wanted to walk into. He was hoping for like a top 12 pick, but I mean 48 is what they got. They've got that's the whole thing now. Who's going to be there? The premier defensive players are going to be gone. The best O-line players are gone. I mean, you're looking at probably, I don't want to call them second tier, but somebody like Monroe Freeling or because Caleb McGarry at right tackle is not exactly a superstar stud, so they're going to need help at tackle as well. Woods from Clemson, he's probably going to be gone at 48. Caden McDonald, the big tackle from Ohio State, I don't think he'll be there. So that's the main problem for Ryan right now. Where do I find value in this pick? Or maybe I go back and give up that 48th pick and get a few more picks and try and do some work. Wide receiver is something they're going to need to address, in my opinion. I think they're a little light in that position. For them, that part of the draft, they're probably going to see players like Denzel Boston, huge guy out of Washington, 6'5". I mean, they're just loaded with slot receivers in there. So somebody like him would be a nice addition. But when they heard that news, like we all did in San Francisco, about Pierce and his extracurricular activities with Dade County's finest, you gotta think that linebacker is going to be kind of jumping to the top of their wish list. Fortunately for them, I mean, like we said, it is a deepish draft in the top tier. There is a lot of good kind of second tier. We talked already about C.J. Allen out of Georgia, Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech. I like the kid. I think I mentioned him last week. Josiah Trotter, Jeremiah Trotter's kid out of Missouri. So there's every chance that one of those three will be there. Really, really good, serviceable linebackers they were probably focusing on at that 48th pick. Another person to look out for. It's not not technically related to the draft, but it might impact on their decisions to draft, is Jahan Dotson from that they got from the Eagles. I think he's in year 5 now. Not exactly lit the world on fire. Was a first round pick in 22, but he'll be looking to turn the world up and really put a marker on. He was used to being the number 1 guy, and he was number 2. Then he got lost in the mix of Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. So he'll be looking to make a fresh start. So he might be that option for the Falcons to say, you know what, I think we're good right now with this guy. Let's focus on the linebacker situation. And like everybody else, secondary is going to be a big thing to address. I think the addition of Stefanski in there will give him a nice picture as to what he's going to look at. He saw the impact that the secondary and the defense in general had in Cleveland, and he's not going to bring Schwartz with him, but he's going to look at what Schwartz was able to do and how that impacted the team in a positive manner. So I would look at some corners and safeties in that part of the draft too. But yeah, I've got to think that the linebacker position has got to be something they're going to be zeroing in on, because I don't think anyone's going to know from day to day what's going on with Pierce.
Shane, with the benefit now of hindsight on that James Pierce draft pick, we can see that it probably wasn't the best use of the capital that the Falcons deployed, although let's, as Ciaran said, wait and see how that one pans out. Having said that, we were crediting the Falcons last year with doing what they needed to do in the draft and addressing the positions of need, particularly addressing that pass rush, which they did successfully turn around last year. It's going to need a little bit more work this year, depending on Pierce's availability. But I wouldn't be too down on the Falcons, or am I wrong here? Like they do have a strong roster. I think Stefanski upgrades them in the coaching stakes. Granted, they've replaced Penix with Tua while he recovers from his injury, who's effectively the left-handed Kirk Cousins, slow and steady, don't throw the ball too far, try not to make too many mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, we said this last year as well, that the Falcons have the most talented roster in the division. And I think you're right. This is Stefanski being in there as coach, but if it changes their prospects going forward, be interesting as well. I mean, we talk so much about the fact they don't have a first rounder, but hitting in that sort of 6 to 7 rounders, whoever they bring in there is going to be key. And I think Stefanski might be a better coach to do that than we've seen previously in Atlanta. I just think
because the knock on the Falcons, to your point, has been the drop-off between the star players that they undoubtedly have and the next tier. Like, if you talked about the Panthers and Dave Canales saying we don't draft for depth, the Falcons historically definitely do not draft for depth because they don't have any.
But that's a big thing. I mean, on offense in particular, it's like you've Drake London as wide receiver, and then where does it go then? That's why I think receiver should be target number one coming in here. Bijan Robinson as running back. And what's your second option? It just completely drops off. I mean, especially in a situation where you sort of have two quarterbacks again. It's this whole Penix Cousins experiment has replaced itself with the Penix Tua experiment, and I don't know if that's going to give you better results. Maybe they might even bring in another quarterback later on in the draft. I believe Georgia Tech's Haynes King, hero of the Aer Lingus College Classic, was in the building as well. I can't imagine they will use draft capital on him later on.
Hero of the Aer Lingus College Classic, where he ran the ball rather than throwing it. I'm not necessarily sure that's the solution.
They won anyway. That's all that matters. So maybe that is the solution here for this Falcons team. Look, I think no matter what they do, again, coaching is going to be key here. But I definitely think the skill positions, because they've invested in defense, and I think they'll be able to coach in defense. We talk about what are the top needs. You outlined the linebacker situation. Again, as we were saying here, there's a deep enough linebacker class. They may be able to still fix that in free agency as well. I definitely think that wide receiver is someone that they need to sort of hit as quickly as possible. People are even saying if you go further down the line and you end up looking for the likes of Zachariah Branch from Georgia and see if he fits into to the system there. There's a few different options that they could go to, but I think at this point now with Atlanta, like what's the knock been? The knock hasn't been talent. The knock hasn't been injury. Coaching has been a key part of it, but I think maximizing everything that you're doing in key moments. I saw them play in Germany when they had control of the game in certain phases, but they just couldn't execute. And they have no real playmakers outside of London and Robinson. They need more playmakers. They just need somebody who they feel has that magic to create something out of nothing. And I think the draft really needs where to go and dip in for that. I think skill position players on offense needs to be where they go in their first couple of hits, and it depends on how they might trade up for that as well. Wide receiver for me is a key area for the Falcons to hit here. The linebacker situation can be fixed elsewhere in the draft or elsewhere free agency. They need that magic. They need someone with magic hands. They need someone to have London on that offense in particular, and I think wide receiver is where they should go.
Craig, with the Falcons, they kind of draft like a lot of fans approach to drafts. They don't really care about picks after the first round. It often feels with the Falcons, because they're one of those teams that you're thinking, when was the last time you hit a home run with a guy who came, other than the ones that were expected to hit home runs with? And that's probably a function of coaching as well. I've said it often enough. It's not a coincidence that teams like the Ravens, the Steelers, the Packers consistently, quote unquote, draft well in the later rounds. They're developing the players that they bring in. And Falcons haven't done that well.
No, Kevin Stefanski is now there as head coach, and that's something he's going to have to take up with Cunningham and Matt Ryan. I do think that wide receiver is somewhere where they can hit in that second round quite easily. I think that it's quite a deep draft class at receiver. I was looking at Chris Brazzell for them, but he has off-field issues, and I don't really think that they want to run down that road again. And they don't apparently.
A very unfortunate choice of words there, given what happened with James Pierce. But anyway, carry on. Allegedly.
But there is
very much run down that road when the cops came.
There is Jeremy Bernard from Alabama that would be a starting wide receiver too, I think, that could be there. A lot of us are also overlooking the fact that Kyle Pitts is still there on the franchise tag. So there is another person, but they could do with leaning on their wide receivers a little bit more, seeing as I think that their second wide receiver had around about 300 yards for the season. So not ideal. Another position though is cornerback. Their cornerback room is awful, like seriously underwhelming. D. Alford, who was a big part of that, he's gone off to Buffalo, but there really hasn't been a lot of change in that backfield. I think that there's a key person there that if he's available, then they should go for, and that's Keith Obney from Arizona State. I think he really showed up in the playoffs for that run that they had. Obviously, was overshadowed a little bit by a certain New York Giants running back who headbutts walls, but he kind of really came to the forefront during that playoff run and had a really good season last year and has kind of carried it on. It just depends on whether they want to take risks. And unfortunately, because of the picks that they have, they probably will need to. I do think defensive line is an issue. You look at all the mock drafts, every mock draft has them taking Christian Miller from Georgia or Caleb Banks from Florida if he falls that far. So a lot of people think that the interior of that line is where they need to go, but wide receiver and cornerback just looks super thin at the moment for the Falcons.